the question. Did you try this question?
No, sir, I haven't started the questions yet. I just read through the book one more time.
Okay, so let's begin.
Okay.
The bacterial resistance to antibiotics is a direct consequence of the overuse of these drugs. In the USA, currently, more than half of the doctor visits for upper respiratory tract infections are prescribed antibiotics, despite knowledge that most URIs are caused by viruses. Now, this is something serious. The problem is that the same thing is happening over here in Pakistan. Like they are suggesting to take the antibiotic when when they even know that it's going to result in the overuse and may result in the drug resistance, but they are constantly giving these drugs to the patients for the respiratory tract infections, especially not the upper but the lower respiratory tract infections.
Okay.
So even they know that it caused by viruses. In the early 1990s, Finnish Public Health Authority began discouraging the use of antibiotic erythromycin for URIs in response to rising bacterial resistance to the antibiotic, and the national erythromycin consumption per capita dropped by 43%. The
Yes.
data in Figure 11 shows the incidence in Finland over a 10-year period of Streptococcus pyogenes strains that are resistant to antibiotic erythromycin, as pyogenes is responsible for the condition known as strep throat. So, antibiotic resistance 1992, 3, 4, 5, 6, then 7, 8, 9, 2001, 2. Okay. Now, the pattern on the graph that you are looking at basically tells us that when the people started getting aware of the things that it must not be used so much, you can say in so much abundance or in so much higher amounts, so the resistance also fell. Like,
Yes.
when you do not use the antibiotic, its resistance also does not develop. Same idea I gave you in the previous lesson, that basically when you consider a drug, when you consider an antibiotic as a selection pressure, there is a higher chance that bacteria would generate the same mutation. Like,
Can
although bacteria does not know how, or bacteria does cannot create a mutation on its own, but it's a fact that the mutation mostly occurs according to the selection pressure. So if you lift the selection pressure, if you lift up the selection pressure, meaning now the selection pressure is no more, meaning the bacteria won't know a pressure, won't know a factor of nature. Like, you have reduced the use of antibiotic, meaning now the bacteria are not going to face the selection pressure anymore. So their resistance would fall. Why? Because when you don't use that same antibiotic again, it means that you have removed the selection a certain selection pressure. But let's say you started using another antibiotic, then in that case the bacteria would start getting killed. So, like, it's you can say it's a two-way thing. If you overuse it, the resistance will develop. If you don't use an antibiotic, the resistance may also fall.
may also fall.
So
Okay.
this pattern tells us basically that after 1992 and 19 although in 1990s, this the in the Finland, maybe it's basically why it's called as Finnish public health authorities, that they began discouraging the use of the antibiotic. Although the resistance percentage antibiotic resistance raised in 1993, but the trend you are looking at till 1996 tells us that after getting fully aware of the resistance developing in the bacterium, in the bacteria, uh, the graph gradually fell. The reading
Yes.
of the graph gradually fell till 1996. And then maybe after that the people started using the antibiotic again, because they thought that now the resistant bacteria has been removed from the population. Resistant bacteria have been removed from the population, so let's start using the antibiotic again. So
Yes.
when they started using it again, the resistance, it increased again, and then they reduced the use, and you can see the result till um, 2002. So that is what you are looking at. When you increase the use, the antibiotic resistance would also increase. Okay,
Yes.
describe the pattern of erythromycin resistance over the period from 1992 to 2002. So in this case, in this particular question, you just need to describe what's happening.
Yes. Okay. So
You, Mhm.
we
No,
see
no,
from.
you don't need. Just
Oh,
you can do it for yourself
yes, sir.
right now. You don't need. I was just saying that if they have like if they have asked that describe and suggest a reason, or maybe describe and explain the pattern of erythromycin, then you would say that you would have to explain it. But if they are only saying that that the pattern, just describe the pattern, you just need to describe the graph.
Yes.
So then after that, suggest a reason. Yeah, over here you would describe what's happening. Calculate the percentage difference in the antibiotic resistance between 2002 and 1992. So percentage difference. Okay. Would you like to calculate it?
Okay. So it would be in this case, it would be 17. Uh, it would be 17 minus 5 divided by 17 times 100. Uh,
Divided by 17 times 100. Exactly.
it would be a 70.6% difference.
Mhm. Okay. Evaluate the claim that reduction in the use of insulin has led to a reduction in the incidence of. Okay, evaluate the claim that reduction in the use of. Now, this is the same question as I was describing. That when you reduce the use, the resistance also reduced.
Reduces.
So that is basically, you can say, it is apparent. It is apparent that this graph uh, does explain. This graph does explain that if you reduce the use, the resistance also reduces.
Reduces. Okay, sir.
Oh,
One question. Um,
sure.
it says when it says suggest a pattern, it's a two-mark question. So I
Hmm.
think so. Like for the reason for the 1998, it would be that the disease was maybe it was more found. It spread more, so that's why the resistance also increased.
Uh, if the disease increases, mm, okay, okay. So your claim or your question is maybe that in the 1998 the resistance increased
Yes.
because the disease increased. Obviously, obviously, I totally agree on that, because you would use antibiotic only in the case of the disease.
Yes.
And the problem is, you should have used the different antibiotic. This is the main thing. Like if you are using, and if you have to use the antibiotic, then you must be using a different antibiotic. You are using the same antibiotic again, erythromycin. And the
Okay.
erythromycin basically is like, there are already bacteria that can resist it. So those bacteria would proliferate very easily. So if the disease is rising, obviously we would use antibiotic more. But the problem is, if you have to use antibiotic, then you may change the antibiotic. Then don't use it again and again.
Yes.
Similarly, like another thing, that if this problem viral problem, if it is happening, then why are you using the antibiotic in the first place? That is another way of saying the thing.
Okay.
Getting it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Moving ahead, we are. Hang on. Okay. Now we are going to discuss the we are going to discuss the next chapter, gas exchange. All right. First of all, you tell me, what do you already know about this chapter?
Okay, in this chapter, we cover first of all we cover the lung structure, and where we
Hmm.
discuss the alveoli, which is it's like small little tiny air sacs that allow for the movement of I think so. It's for the movement of basic respiration and oxygen.
Hmm.
And then we also learn about the function of the capillaries and
Hmm.
how they move the blood and oxygen through to your organs, such as the lung. Then we also
Hmm.
look at the breathing mechanism with I think so it has to do with the Boyle's law, that the pressure is inversely proportional to the volume. And then we also look at the respiratory muscles, the inspiration and expiration, and then they
Hmm.
also talk about some lung disorders and reasons for a lung cancer, and how that affects the alveoli.
So, what do you excuse me? Okay, what do you want me to discuss over here in this chapter?
Uh, I think so. It's mostly with there was a term. It was called phenomocystis. I think so. There's two different types of phenomocystis that I don't find so clear. The difference between the two phenomocystis,
Pneumocytes.
pneumocytes. Sorry,
Okay.
pneumocytes.
Now, there's a very clear and very apparent thing. But first of all, always remember that there are three words that are always related to the lungs. Meaning, whenever you hear, whenever you listen these three words, you must know that these words are used for anything related to lungs. Like it could be anything. It can be disease. It can be a structure. But if these three words, one of these three words are have been used, it means it's related to lungs. And what are those three words? Number one word that you must familiar of is the is the pulmonary. This
Pulmonary.
word is always related to lungs. Number two,
Yeah.
pneumo is the word that is always related to lungs, or more specifically, now I don't tell this to everyone. It basically refers to the respiratory epithelium.
Very
Respiratory epithelium, meaning the epithelium that is exchanging the gases.
okay.
Like pneumo can be a word used by an earthworm, or used by the scientists for the earthworm,
The earthworm.
for the arthropods,
Yeah.
maybe for the starfish, any of the animal. Why? All the animals have respiratory epithelia, means all the animals have the epithelia for gaseous exchange.
Yes.
So basically, what is an alveolus? Alveolus basically is our respiratory epithelium, meaning the gas only exchanges when it reaches the alveolus.
Alveolus. Yes.
Hmm. Meaning that in alveolus, the lining of the cells can be referred by a word pneumo,
Pneumo.
because wherever we use the word for the respiratory epithelium or for the epithelium that is exchanging the gases, we would use the word for that epithelium as pneumo.
Okay.
So all the cells that are related to this particular layer would be called as pneumocytes.
Pneumocytes.
Pneumocytes. Okay, the third word that I wanted to tell you was pleural. PLE. It's not plural for like singular and plural. It's basically plural. This is also a word that is always related to the lungs. So
Lungs.
whenever you hear about these words, you must know that it's related to the lungs, maybe a disease or whatever. So pneumocytes are the cells that are lining the alveolus.
Alveoli.
Okay. Now pneumocytes can be of different types. See, uh, whenever you talk about the alveolus, alveolus is considered a tissue.
Yes.
And what is a tissue made of?
We said that tissues, they're made of, in this case, small layers of organs, or not organs, but cells. They're just a bunch of
Cells.
layers of cells.
Don't do that blender again. Tissues are made of cells,
Cells.
and tissues combine to create the organs.
Yes.
So tissues are made of cells. Now, it means that if alveolus is a tissue, it must have several type of cells.
Yes.
Alveolus is considered a tissue. It means that it must have several types of cells.
Of cells.
And out of these several types of cells, you don't you are not supposed to know all those types, but there is one type that you're supposed to know, and two types that you are supposed to know. These are named as pneumocytes type 1 and pneumocytes type 2.
Type 2.
In pneumocytes type 1, in pneumocytes type 1, you have those cells which are basically exchanging the gas. The pneumocytes type 1 have are so much thin cells that there is a very small distance between the oxygen placed over here and the capillary present over here, a very small and thin difference. So it means that the major difference between the pneumocytes 1 and pneumocyte 2 is the size. Just look at this. This is pneumocyte 2.
Okay.
Just look at the size of it. If the oxygen would try to diffuse in through pneumocyte 2, it would take a long and long and long time.
Yes.
But it is recommended that it should be diffused through pneumocyte 1 because it has a smaller size.
Yes.
It's almost like you have two cloth sheets. If you pour the water on one of the cloth sheets, the water can easily pass through it. But the other one is a thicker one, so water does not is not able to pass through it that quickly. So that is the main difference between it. So remember that whenever we talk about the pneumocytes 1, their size, total size, the cytoplasm thickness is 0.15 micrometer.
0.15 micrometers. Okay.
0.15 micrometer is quite, you can say, thin cytoplasmic thickness.
Yes.
Through this, they can easily pass, and obviously, they can easily enter into the blood cells. Into the Now, this is the erythrocyte. This is the total size of what? This is the total size of the pneumocyte. They are basically showing the pneumocyte one. So I guess this is the pneumocyte one. The oxygen is present over here. It just has to go through it and
Interesting.
enter in the erythrocytes. Now, basically, this is the lining. This is the lining of the pneumocyte one. This is
Okay.
so it can easily pass through it and enter into the erythrocyte.
Yes.
So that is type 1 pneumocytes. Hang on. Now, talking about the type 2 pneumocytes, their total, you can say, they occupy about 5% of the total surface area, and they release the mucus. They secrete a fluid. No, not mucus, they secrete a fluid. See, the thing is that whenever there is a fluid, now always keep this in your mind. Like if you put the iron in the oxygen, but that iron is not wet, would it be corroded or not?
If it's not wet, then no, it would not be corroded.
Similarly, if you put the water on the iron, it would start the corrosion would start.
Yes.
The corrosion would start. Now, why does it happen that the water, when it falls on the iron starts rotting, but if there is no water, the iron would keep its shape and there would be no rotting. Why? Have you ever thought about it?
This is because the water it starts dissolving the iron substance and it makes it smaller. And I don't know, but in chemistry we learned that like the bonding gets dissociated in the iron, causing it to deform.
That may be a point, but because I don't know chemistry in that much detail, but one thing that I know is that water provides the reactive environment.
Yes,
Water provides a reactive environment, and water also have dissolved oxygen. It had dissolved oxygen, means that the oxygen dissolves into the water very easily. Now, let me ask you a question, then I'll be heading towards the concept. Uh, where do you think the fish take their oxygen from water?
uh,
How do you think?
they take the oxygen from but it's they release their oxygen and then they take it in from it's from the around where the coral is, right? Not from the
Around the?
surface, around where like the coral or where plants are. They
Okay, no,
release.
no, no.
No.
See, they live in the water. They live in the water, right?
Yes.
When they live in the water, they obviously need an oxygen source. What is
Yes.
their oxygen source? That is the question.
Okay. Is the oxygen source would not be like the plants or the everything at the bottom of the ocean bed that are releasing the oxygen molecules?
Okay, fine. Like the plants are the oxygen source, but
Yes.
how that oxygen is getting into the gills of the fish?
Uh, this I don't know. So how they get into
Okay, let
the
me let me
gill.
make the thing easier. Let me make the question easier. Uh, See, what I am trying to say over here is that plant would obviously release the oxygen, and the fish would take that oxygen. But
Yes.
like if that oxygen is released from the plant, it means that oxygen is dissolved into the water.
Yes.
And wherever the water is present, the oxygen dissolves into the water very easily. Sometimes what the students often answer, your answer was not that bad, although mostly students answer that the fish break the water, separate the hydrogen and oxygen. They break the water and separate the hydrogen and oxygen, and they get that oxygen, which is a totally false concept.
Okay.
It's a totally false concept. No animal can break the water.
Yes.
Now, what does it mean? It means basically that when the fish take the oxygen, they basically take the oxygen from the water, and that oxygen is dissolved into the water. Similarly, the oxygen has a great tendency to get dissolved into the fluid or water or something made of water. So what do type 2 pneumocytes do? They secrete a solution that creates moist surface inside the alveoli to prevent the size of the alveolus adhering to each other. One thing. Second, the fluid that is released by them would have a high tendency. This moisture allows oxygen in the alveolus to dissolve and then diffuse to the blood. Meaning, now let me tell you what is happening over here. See, let's say there is air and there is cell. The diffusion of oxygen directly from air into the cell is difficult.
Yes.
It's difficult and slowed process. But if there is a cell, this is air, and the oxygen coming from air, and the this cell has a coating of moisture, the oxygen would readily dissolve into the moisture and then get into the cell. meaning to make the oxygen diffusion easier, the moisture is necessary.
Yes.
And that moisture basically is released by the pneumocytes type 2. So the type 1s only diffuse the oxygen because their cytoplasm size is so small. But the
Yes.
type 2 basically they make the things easier as they release the moisture and the oxygen dissolves into it and enter into the cell.
Okay. So this fluid is like a moisture forming the dissolved oxygen.
Mm. And this basically is surfactant as well. What is a surfactant?
Surfactant. This I don't know, sir. What is a surfactant?
Surfactant basically is a surface active agent, or you can say is it's a compound that reduces the friction within a particular, I would say, within a particular compound. Like if you have a machinery, then you put the grease into it, like the
Yes.
water, like the sorry, like the engine. You put grease into it. Then you have some other machinery. You want, like, if you want to, if you have eaten something that has fats in it, then you have to wash your hands.
Yes.
Why? Because those fats have to be removed from your hands, because the soap contains the salt as well as the surface active agents. Everything that is that is stick to your hand basically would be removed from it. It
Removed
would
from.
be removed from it because the soap is a the surface active agent, or surface you can say it's a surfactant. So
Surfactant.
it removes the friction. It removes the friction. Okay. Now the thing is, why is it required over here? Why is it required? See, when the lungs expand and squeeze, there is a high chance that the cells of the alveoli would overlap each other.
Yes.
They would adhere into each other. They would overlap each other, and if there is friction, then maybe the your lung is right now in the relaxed form. But when you expand it, maybe those alveoli would be you can say they would have abrasive damage. Abrasive damage means that they would have uh, a damage caused by the friction.
Yes. They would
And
slide over
maybe
each
this,
other.
yeah, they would slide over each other, and they would, you can say, the sentence, let's read the sentence again, that alveoli to prevent the sides of the alveolus adhering to each other by reducing surface tension. Now let's say there are two alveoli side by side. They are getting squeezed and then they are getting expanded. Now, in both cases, their side by side friction can damage them. So, that surfactant does not only protect uh, an alveolus from inside but also from outside.
From outside.
Like it's a complete package. It
Okay.
protects from the abrasive damage of air, because the air also causes the damage. If you have ever experienced the dry air, then you'll see that dry air causes serious damage to the skin.
The skin.
It
Okay.
causes serious damage to the skin. Similarly, if the air is dried, the moisture is important from in the on the inside, and it that surfactant or moisture also protects, and it is getting released from the type 2 pneumocytes. So it protects from the alveoli from, like, fusing into each other, colliding each other, and getting destroyed. So that is the benefit of it.
Okay.
Got that?
Yes, so it's also produced inside this moisture and or no, the moisture is only produced outside, but it helps the internal structure and the external structure of the alveoli.
Okay. Yeah, you are right. And in on the inside, it basically is providing the moisture for dissolved oxygen, as well as it's providing the protection from the
Friction.
dried air. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Mm. Now, see, the next very important thing about this is that um, what is that moist material made of? That fluid is made of uh, similar to phospholipids. And you know the phospholipid. What is the structure of phospholipid? Would you care to explain?
Yes, phospholipids, they have a polar head and a hydrophilic head and a hydrophobic tail. So they have
Hmm.
basically it's a saturated and unsaturated fatty acid, and it's composed of glycerol,
Glycerol.
glycerol. Sorry, glycerol.
Yeah. Now the phospholipids are also released, like though that moisture that is released by the pneumocyte type 2 is contains the phospholipids, and the polar head are towards the cell membrane, and the hydrophobic end is toward the air.
Yes,
And basically, this reduces surface tension and prevents the water from causing the sides of the alveoli to adhere when air is exhaled. So, like this is the same fluid that protects us. So, very important thing this is, and basically it has multiple function, not only prevention, but also that not only prevention, but also helping the to dissolve the oxygen into it.
to dissolve the oxygen.
All right, is it clear now?
Yes, it's clear with the production of the moisture.
Hmm. Okay, now what else do you want to do in this chapter? Basically,
Uh,
I'm trying to wind up the things.
yes, sir. Um, I was just wondering if we could just quickly just go through in this case, just the respiratory muscles, the contraction and the decontraction of the lungs itself.
All right. First of all, would you care to explain the ventilation?
Okay, sure. So ventilation,
No. Wait. First, you would have to define the ventilation. Then you would have to differentiate between the ventilation and diffusion.
the differentiate between the ventilation and
Diffusion.
the fusion. Okay, so we know basically ventilation. The purpose of ventilation, it is to have the constant oxygen and carbon dioxide in the alveoli and blood. And the process of the ventilation, it has three processes: ventilation, gas exchange, and cell respiration. So in ventilation, we basically what happens is that oxygen is consumed or inhaled by all living organisms. And during cellular respiration in our body, the oxygen that we take in, it is reduced as carbon dioxide. So what happens is that O2 is uh, being released from the alveoli in the bloodstream as the CO2 is released, and the lungs always need a fresh air and the alveoli needs fresh air in the atmosphere. So what means is that the O2, it always has to be, we need a lot of oxygen O2 in the alveoli so that the CO2 level stays down. Because if we do not take in a sufficient amount of oxygen, we would be taking in carbon dioxide. And the lungs, they have a very large surface area, and this allows for the high rate of the gas exchange, which is the exchange of the oxygen and carbon dioxide between the alveoli and bloodstream. So now we're going to talk the diffusion, the difference between diffusion. So diffusion, it is like when the movement of a molecule from a high concentration to a low concentration.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I think apart from that, I think the diffusion, it requires the membrane. But apart from that, sir, I don't know too much more. I know that there is passive diffusion, if that's any difference. It was studied in chapter 2. It was Passive diffusion, which across is between a cell membrane, and it has to do with the phospholipid bilayer, where we have carrier proteins, channel proteins, and integral proteins.
See, you explained well. Now, first of all, remember that when it comes to the ventilation, the ventilation basically is a procedure when air moves,
Air moves.
when the air moves, meaning the movement of air is called as ventilation. Now, what's the difference between the ventilation and diffusion? See, when you talk about the whole air, it's ventilation. But when it comes to the movement of a single gas or the movement of any particular molecule from higher concentration to lower concentration, regardless of it's a gas or anything inside the water, but if it is moving from higher concentration to lower concentration, it would be counted as the diffusion. What's the
Diffusion.
meaning of it? The ventilation is only for air. The
Okay.
ventilation is only for the whole air, not for a single gas. But the diffusion is for gases, for maybe for it's for gases, it's for other molecules, but the diffusion ventilation is only for air.
Only for air.
Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now let me explain the things a bit more. The ventilation is always done by certain, you can say, machinery or certain instruments. Let's say, if you have a room that is really hot, you open the window. Why? To allow the air to pass, to allow the cold air to pass, meaning that the hot air may be moving outside and the cold air would be moving inside, so you are allowing the ventilation. You're
Yeah.
allowing the ventilation. And sometime, now, what is your concept of a ventilator when we use the ventilators in the ICU?
Uh, we use the ventilator in the ICU. It's because the lungs are not able to extract O2 sufficiently in the air. So we have to physically provide fresh air into the body. Otherwise, we would have very low blood levels in the body. And then the major organs will also start failing.
You are almost there. You are almost there. See, ventilator, when we use the ventilator machine in the ICU, the main purpose of that ventilator is to move the air into and out of the lungs with the pressure that is required. Meaning, the thing is still related to the movement of air.
Movement of
We are
air.
using the machinery to move the air into to move air into the lungs and out of the lungs.
Yes.
Now, why do we have to use the ventilator?
uh, why we have to use the ventilator.
Hmm.
This is because we have to take the air from the nose or the mouth. But in the case of like if a person is severely injured, then the nose and the mouth they're unable to absorb like a high amount of O2. They can only absorb very limited. So isn't it that there's like very little oxygen that's being pumped into the lungs? Or it's like very little oxygen that the person's absorbing compared to if we physically use a machine that we can make sure they get sufficient amount of oxygen in the lungs.
Okay. Now, listen to me. if you have if you have an electricity failure, you may use the generator or the inverter, which is also called as UPS, right?
Yes,
What does it mean? It means if the original machinery fails, you bring the alternate.
the alternate.
Is that right?
Yes,
So it means that when whenever the original machinery for a certain particular work fails to work, then the then or you can say, then you have to use another machinery to do the same work. Now, what was the original machinery that was doing the ventilation?
That was the lungs in this case. That was doing the ventilation.
Exactly. Meaning, when the lungs stop working, when the lungs stop ventilating the air, when the lungs stop moving the air with the pressure that is required, then we use an alternate machinery to ventilate the things, ventilate the air. Now, coming to the point that you require to explain how the lung is ventilating the air.
How the lung is ventilating the air. It's firstly the oxygen. It undergoes a cellular respiration in the lungs, and then the carbon dioxide it releases it as a waste product. And the O2, it's being taken in from the alveoli, the little tissues or the little holes in the lungs, which is then being transported around the bloodstream.
No, 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 no. That is gaseous exchange. See, these two things are totally different. One
Okay,
thing is ventilation, which means movement of air into the lungs.
movement of the
Other
into the
thing is the gaseous exchange, which means movement of oxygen into the blood and movement of carbon dioxide out of the blood.
yes,
Both of these things are totally different.
totally different.
They are totally different. Now, you must remember that ventilation is done by other method and gaseous exchange is done by another method.
Yes,
For ventilation, you have to use your muscles and the lungs.
and the lungs.
And for gaseous exchange, you have to use the concentration gradient. You must remember these words, please, because this is
Yeah,
a very clear difference. This is a difference that you need to know. These are two totally different things occurring in the same organ.
the same organ.
One, ventilation. Two, the gaseous exchange. Ventilation would be done by the muscles and the lungs, and the gaseous exchange would be done by the alveoli or the respiratory epithelium.
Okay,
So now what do you think? How the ventilation would occur?
so the ventilation occurs. It's only through the muscles we're saying. So
Mhm.
that means that it has to be a physical breathing. So it would be through the nose and through the mouth and just the lungs, and no other part.
Any other muscle? Any the name of any muscle that you remember?
Uh, not the. I know the one muscle. I think so in the lung. It was the bronchus, but apart from that, sir, I don't remember any other
Exactly. No,
muscles
no,
in the
no, no,
nose or anything.
no, 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 no. Wait up. First of all, you need to differentiate and distinguish between different parts of the lungs, because there is like something respiratory system. You have to understand it in a better way. See, first of all, if I ask you the names of your part, what's the name of it?
This is the trachea, sir.
Trachea. And down here, what's this?
Uh, Down there, that's the bronchus, sir.
Yes, this is the bronchus, or collectively they are called as bronchi. There is
Bronchi.
no muscle over here right now. And inside, you have some other bronchi that when they would end at the end of it, you would have the alveolus over here. Over here, you would have the
Yes.
alveolus. So that's the thing over here. Now, what's the main thing over here that for which I brought to you? What is this thing?
This curve, this is the diaphragm, I think it is.
Diaphragm.
Diaphragm.
Diaphragm. This is the main muscle that causes the ventilation,
It causes the ventilation. Okay.
meaning it moves the air inside and outside.
Inside and outside.
Now, this is one largest muscle. Okay, another thing, let me tell you, because you named the things already. So let me tell you, there is no use of nose during breathing.
During breathing.
Nose is not for breathing. Mouth is not for breathing or ventilation.
Okay.
These are just the openings through which the air can pass. But if you create an alternate hole that is not mouth, not nose, but it gives the air the passage towards the trachea, then that hole can also perform the work for the passage of air. So
Passage.
these are just the passages of air, just because these are available passages. If there was any other passage, the air would have passed through that passage. Got my point?
Yes, sir. So
So,
if we had any
mhm,
other hole connected to the trachea, air could
yeah,
also be passed through that hole.
yes, that is why nose and mouth don't have anything to do with the breathing.
Okay, but is the mouth not connected to the trachea or like
Yes,
a bit?
yes, that is why basically they are a passage for the air, but they are, you can say, one, if your nose is blocked, do you breathe?
No, sir.
What? If the nose is blocked, you
Yes.
cannot breathe.
No, you cannot breathe from the nose. It's from the mouth then.
Yeah, exactly. I was basically asking that. If your nose
Okay.
is blocked, then we can breathe, but from the
Mouth,
mouth.
yes.
So
No, I thought you meant breathing from the nose, sir.
exactly, my point is, if the mouth and nose are there, but their primary work is not acting as a passageway for the air. Their primary work is to taste and smell.
Taste and smell, yes.
Hang on, please. So basically, now what we do, we are basically going to study that if the nose and mouth are not working for the breathing, they are not, you can say, they are not sucking the air. They are just the holes to let the air pass through. Then who is sucking the air? Who is sucking the air? Who is getting the air inside? You getting my point? What I'm trying to say?
Yes, sir.
The major muscle there is sucking the air from the outside is the diaphragm, and then there are muscles between the ribs.
The ribs.
Between the ribs, where are the ribs? Okay, please show me. All right, let me change the name of it. Rib cage. Okay, basically these are and intercostal muscles. Okay, there's no result of it. Try the same sentence on Google. I just wanted to show you from the stereo diagram. See, remember that, okay, this is a rib cage.
Yes.
This is a rib cage. And the pinkish thing between the ribs are,
Those are the lungs.
those are muscles.
Muscles.
Okay, now this is where you need to understand. Ribs beneath or between the ribs are the muscles, and beneath those muscles are the lungs. Just
Okay.
look at this picture. You'll be surprised that there are three layers of muscles. One, two, and three. And then the lungs are there.
Okay, so this there's like a layer of muscle above the lungs directly.
Exactly, exactly. So consider yourself, just look for yourself. You are having the skin on your chest. Below it, you have a fatty tissue that is obvious to be present over there. If you
Yeah.
don't want to know about it, you can leave it. But the fatty tissue is there, so you cannot just remove it, ignore it. So fat tissue, and then below it you have ribs, and the ribs are containing the muscles above them and below them and in and between the ribs, and then beneath that you have lungs.
Okay.
Now, what is happening over there? These muscles, which are called as, basically, let's talk about the ventilation. The ventilation is the movement. Now let me make the things very very clear. Movement of air, movement of air from a region of higher air pressure to a region of lower air pressure. Lower air pressure. Now, the thing is that if you have a lung and you want to work the lung like the principle of ventilation, if you want to move the air into into the lungs, according to the principle of ventilation, what should be the pressure of air inside the lungs?
The pressure of the air inside the
Let me
lungs.
repeat my question. If you want, do you got the answer? You want to answer?
Yes, the pressure of the air inside the lungs, it would be a high pressure, right? Because we discussed it was like a thin layer of the alveoli. So we'd have a lot of air in a small area.
Read the statement I wrote about the ventilation again.
Movement of air from region of higher pressure region. Okay, yes, it would be low air pressure, sir.
Where?
In the lungs in this case.
Yes. Inside the lungs, you have to keep the air pressure low
No,
so that ventilation can occur, meaning the air from higher pressure must be able to enter inside the lungs, so you have to keep the air pressure lower.
air pressure lower.
All right. Now, uh, see, this is now going to be a very interesting information that the movement of air or the ventilation would be made possible by the diaphragm and the intercostal muscles. Now what is this? Inter means between,
Between
costal means ribs,
ribs.
intercostal muscles mean,
It must be the muscles between the ribs.
exactly. So these two main muscles are working for the ventilation.
Okay.
Okay. Now, see, you have two lungs on right and left. What what do you suppose you should do to make the air pressure fall inside the lungs?
Uh, if the air pressure falls into the lungs, I think so. We would have to dissolve the oxygen, like we said, so that because we discussed that the O2 it can also damage the skin at certain concentrations. So the mucus, it would, or not the mucus, this layer we discussed, it would cause the dissolved oxygen to enter in, and lowering the concentration and lowering
Okay,
the
okay,
pressure.
okay, okay. Okay, listen to me. See, the air is there in your lungs. All right, all right. Suppose that you have a box which has the vacuum. If you open that box, what would happen?
If you open the box with a vacuum, like a lot of dust would come out of the box in the vacuum. You'd have like the airbag would be filled.
The air would be rushing inside, right?
Yes,
The vacuum means no air.
no air.
It means that if you want to move the air into something, what do you have to do? You have to create a vacuum inside.
Okay,
You have to create a vacuum inside so the air can move.
the air can move. Yes,
Air can move into that thing. So, what do you need to do? You need to create a vacuum inside the lungs. And how can you do that? Now, focus, please. You would pull the diaphragm downward. Sorry.
pull it
You
down.
would pull the diaphragm downward. This diaphragm is attached to the lungs. It would pull the lungs along, and the lungs would uh, suddenly would have a higher volume.
higher volume.
Their volume would become larger. And these muscles, which are called as intercostal muscles, they would move outward and upward. They would move outward and upward.
Yes,
Now it means that and these muscles also would take the lungs along with them. It means your lung was like this when it was relaxed.
yes.
But suddenly what happened? It's now like this. It's now like this. Just see the difference.
Okay.
If you expand the volume of the lungs, would the air pressure inside fall or rise?
If you expand the lungs, the air pressure would rise in this case.
Why?
This is because the air would also be allowed to expand toward the lungs. If the lungs is expanding, then there's more air can be pumped into that area.
Yes, that is the point that what I'm saying. Initially, when you would expand the volume, a vacuum-like condition would be created. Why? Because the air pressure, like you may have learned in the laws of gases and everything, that if you expand the volume, the pressure goes down
Yes,
until you add more gas. Is it
yes,
like that? So
yes.
what does it mean? It means that if you expand the lungs, the air pressure is gonna fall down,
Air
and
pressure.
when it is gonna fall down, the air from outside would rush in, because what's the rule of ventilation?
It would be from a high concentration to a low concentration.
Higher air pressure to lower air pressure.
Lower air pressure. Sorry,
Yes.
higher air pressure, lower air pressure.
Yes, it means if you want to ventilate the air into the lungs, you have to expand the lungs. And what muscles would be used? Intercostal and diaphragm.
Diaphragm.
How they would be used? The diaphragm would contract downward, and the intercostal muscles would pull the lungs outward and upward, and the lungs volume would suddenly become expanded, the air pressure would fall and air would rush in.
Air would rush in.
Now, what do you suppose should happen if you want to remove the air?
If we have to remove the air, we would have to decrease we'd have to lower the pressure in a sense that the diaphragm would have to move back up, and
Good.
the intercostal muscles, since they are expanding now, they would have to go back inwards. They would have to
Exactly.
go
Good.
down.
Good.
And then what would happen is that as the lung becomes smaller, as it compresses, there's too much air. It's like a balloon, so the air would like rush out
Well done. Well
of the
done. Well done.
muscle.
So the air would move outside. This
Yeah.
is the whole thing. These are the two muscles. Now, the whole story that I made related to the ICU ventilator means that if you have something bad, if something bad has happened to the lungs or the machinery that is causing the ventilation in your body, then you would have to push the air inside. Push the air inside. Now, one another thing that is needed to be, like you can say, discussed, and that is, like, let's say there's a person there is a person. Now that is basically related to the HL concept. Okay,
Okay.
so you have to listen to me carefully. Now
Yes.
let's say there's a person who has totally fine intercostals and diaphragm. Till that person needs the ventilator. Why? Okay, to understand that particular concept, I would like to describe a thing. We talked about the pneumocytes type 1.
Yes.
What were they about? There was only the thickness of cytoplasm was only zero point
One
0.5
zero
micrometer thick,
0.5 micrometers thick.
and there is capillary just below these pneumocytes. These are the cells of capillary, and let me draw it. So this is, oops,
Capillaries.
sand. Okay, and this is the other wall of the capillary. The other wall of the capillary, and you see that there here oxygen is higher, and over here the oxygen is lower. And opposite for carbon dioxide, right? The carbon dioxide is supposed to be higher inside the blood and lower inside the alveolus.
Alveolus.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. What concept do you have about the partial pressures?
Uh, the partial pressure. Um, I know that the pressure it is inversely proportional to the volume, but apart from that, sir, I don't know what you mean with the partial pressure.
Let's say there is a mixture of gases, or let's say there is air. Air is made of majorly nitrogen, carbon dioxide, and oxygen,
Yes.
right?
Yes, sir.
Uh, let's say at the ocean level, the pressure of air is 760 millimeters of mercury, the same scale as the blood pressure.
As your blood pressure.
760 millimeter of mercury, the pressure is there at sea level. What is the meaning of sea level? Meaning that the lowest point on Earth,
Yes.
the lowest point on, you can say um, I'm sorry, the lowest point on the livable area is the ocean level, right? So at the ocean level, the air pressure is 760 millimeter of mercury. But see, this is a pressure for the whole air. But there must be separate pressures for all these gases. Like nitrogen is 78%, right? The
Yes.
carbon dioxide is 0.03%, and the oxygen is 21%. So the combined pressure of all these gases would become the pressure of air. Are you getting my point?
Yes, sir.
So what would we call the pressure of a separate gas? The pressure of a
It would be the
separate
partial
gas
pressure.
in a mixture. Yes, it would be the partial pressure. Is called as partial pressure, pp. Okay, now you have, like, the things are established, the partial pressure is there. See,
Yes.
when it comes to the oxygen, I'm just telling you some things that are above the requirement, but let's discuss those. If you want to, this is the pressure of the whole air. If you want to know the pressure of oxygen, you have to multiply 760 with the 0.21, meaning you remove the percentage point. You remove the percentage point by dividing it with the 100.
Okay.
So 760 multiplied by 0.21 is
That is 7,621. 159.6, sir.
exactly 760 multiplied by 0.21 is 159.6. Now this is the pressure of what? Oxygen.
Oxygen.
Pressure of oxygen. Now the oxygen pressure, if the oxygen pressure is 159.6, then the oxygen would diffuse too quickly. Diffuse too quickly. The oxygen would diffuse too quickly. Why? Because there is a hell of a lot pressure difference between the oxygen present in the alveolus and the oxygen present in the blood. You know what is the pressure of oxygen in the blood? 40 millimeter of mercury. And what is the oxygen of pressure of oxygen in the air?
159.6.
159, meaning a huge difference.
Yes.
A huge difference. But like if a person starts losing the alveoli, if a person starts losing the alveoli, or maybe suffering from lungs cancer, then he cannot build this pressure difference inside the lungs.
Inside the lungs.
If a person is suffering from a disease mentioned in the end of this chapter called as emphysema, and or maybe the lungs cancer, that person is unable to build such a pressure, or even the pressure closest to this. Let's say if a person is suffering from cancer and he's almost at the last stage, maybe that person only is able to build the pressure of 50 mmHg, which is not even sufficient to move one molecule of oxygen into the lungs,
Into the lungs.
into the blood, I'm sorry, into the blood.
Okay.
So it means that basically even the people with the normal intercostal muscles and the diaphragm, they are not able to absorb the oxygen, so they would have to use the ventilator so they can create a proper pressure of the proper partial pressure of the oxygen and carbon dioxide to maintain the gaseous exchange.
Okay.
Is it fine?
Yes, sir. A person who suffers from cancer. It's that basically they are barely able to transport 1 mole of oxygen, and basically the body needs a certain amount of oxygen to survive, and this oxygen
Pressure.
is this pressure to survive. And if this pressure is not survived, with the cancer, I'm assuming is it that the heart would stop working, right? Or not the heart would stop, but like the blood would not being pumped to the organs. Like
Basic,
my question is
you
like
can.
when someone gets cancer, sir,
Mhm.
of course, like the cells start to deteriorate, but how does it like a person like die? Is it like organ failure, or is it like a lack of oxygen in this case we're saying?
Good question. Basically, it's the lack of oxygen.
Lack of oxygen.
The lungs damage is too much that the brain cannot handle the amount of oxygen in the blood because it's too less.
It's too less.
So it means that it has to either it has to be restored, or it has to be like or the person would have to die.
Okay.
So what I was saying that first of all we discussed what are pneumocytes 1 and 2. Then we
Yes.
discuss what are the muscles that would make the ventilation possible, and how they would make the ventilation possible. They would increase or decrease the air pressure. They would increase or decrease the air pressure inside the lungs, so the air can move inside or outside.
Inside.
This is your actual machinery. But if it gets mutated, or your let's say, or your alveoli maybe, uh, destroyed. Your alveoli may be destroyed, or the pressure is not built up in your alveoli, then you would have to use the ventilator.
Okay. So, in a way, it's all due to the pressure in the alveoli that's not sufficient, causing the person to be put on the ventilator. But I have one question with this, sir. Since
Sure.
the person, the normal body is saying it's taking around 160, what's it called, mm per magnesium. If you put a person on the ventilator, doesn't like the wouldn't the other muscles like also start getting used to like the air coming and stop functioning? Like would like the muscle
I'm
muscle
really
memory
sorry.
be gone?
I'm really sorry. Can you please repeat the question? Your voice lagged. Please repeat it.
Okay, sir. I was wondering that if you put a person on a ventilator, like sometimes if you don't train a muscle, the muscle stops working. You don't have the muscle memory. So when we're
Hmm.
putting this air into the person through the ventilator, would this affect
Hmm.
like the lungs, like the strength of the lungs, or like would the person be able to recover from being put on the ventilator?
See, the muscle memory does not have to do with anything with this.
Anything with this? Okay.
It's a total involuntary act, and your medulla controls it. I showed you the medulla,
Yes.
so the medulla controls it. It's basically the destruction, the extent of alveolar destruction. If the alveoli are destroyed too much, then your air would not be built up. Why? Basically, it's the alveoli who are increasing the surface area. Let's
Yes.
consider a balloon. A balloon can take the air in, but does it have a surface area? No,
No.
because you cannot exchange the air through the balloon.
Yes.
You cannot exchange the air through the balloon, so it means it has zero surface area. What is important about the lungs? Lungs are only the balloons. The real thing that is present inside the lungs is the alveoli.
Alveoli.
So if your alveoli are destroyed or blocked, then it means your surface area is reducing. The surface
Yes.
area is reducing, and if you are recovered from the cancer, or let's say you are recovered from the corona or something like that, your body would take a lot of time, at least 3 to 4 months, to recover the amount of alveoli to get the proper amount of oxygen.
Problematic oxygen. Okay.
Is it clear?
Yes, so the alveoli, we're saying it can be like reformed, right? Because or it cannot be reformed.
No,
Uh,
no, they can reform. They
they
can
can reform.
reform. It's a very, very slow process because it's a tissue regeneration,
Tissue.
tissue creation. So basically, it's let me let me tell you from the Google. Like, let's say, and the alveoli regenerate after cancer or emphysema. Hmm. Uh, okay, if they're damaged, but medical attention is key to preventing complications. Like you can say that they can repair,
they can repair.
they can self-repair, and it's a report from uh, Medical News Today. So we can lung regeneration. Okay, let's have a look at this because this is one of the most authentic websites. So let's read their abstract. What they are saying: respiratory system has an extensive ability to respond to injury and regenerate lost or damaged cells. The unperturbed adult lung is remarkably quiescent, but after insult or injury, progenitor population can be activated or remaining cells can re-enter the cell cycle. Techniques including cell lineage tracing or transcriptome analysis have provided novel and exciting insights into how the lungs and trachea regenerate in response to injury and have allowed identification of pathways important now informing approaches to for modulating the which means overall it means what they can
Regenerate.
regenerate.
No, because I was just wondering. I remember we discussed it was in chapter 3 with the pluripotent cells. That if an organ or tissue is damaged, we can create them to regenerate it. I
Mhm.
was wondering if it was like any procedure we would do for the lungs in this case. The
See, always remember the two words have a lot of different meanings. One word biologically, I'm not saying commonly. One
yes,
word is the regeneration. The other word is the repair.
repair.
The regeneration means that a person lost a part of an organ and he can build that part again. Let's say uh, a person's bone is fractured, he lost the bone, The bone is no more with him. Would the bone repair? Oh, sorry. Would the bone regenerate?
The bone wouldn't, if it's fractured, it would repair, but if it's like gone, then it would not be able to regenerate without.
Exactly. If it's gone,
No.
it's not gonna regenerate. Similar thing would happen to other organs. It's only the liver that after losing the 75% of the liver can regenerate itself into a whole new liver.
Whole new liver.
Like 75% of the liver is lost. Even then, it can repair itself.
Okay.
Now, coming to the point of the lungs, they specifically use the words repair for the alveoli, not regenerate. Repair means that the alveoli destroy, damaged, but they heal themselves, meaning they are there, they are not lost. Your lung is there, the lung is not lost, means it can repair itself. But
Okay.
if someone loses a lung due to a particular infection, then infection or maybe some sort of bullet or whatever you can name it, it would never be regenerated. So you
Yeah.
can repair. And the reference that you gave about the pluripotent or multipotent stem cells, basically those stem cells, the multipotent stem cells are able to repair any organ.
Yes.
Our all organs have the cells that are multipotent, and they can repair our organs.
Okay, sir.
Now
Uh,
talking about the yeah, please.
yeah, just one last question. It was when we were talking about the ventilator.
Mhm.
It's to supply with the oxygen at the volume, at the desired volume. But
Mhm.
you know, when people suffer from asthma, where they're like where they do like sports activities and they're unable to breathe
Mhm.
after they do activities.
Mhm.
The inhaler they take, is that also like a ventilator type function to expand the lungs and produce the oxygen or push oxygen in, or why do they take that like inhaler in?
See, asthma is a totally different disease. Basically, this asthma is um, a disease is not that does not result in the alveolar destruction.
And lungs. Okay.
It's a problem of allergy. Like the
Okay.
people, whenever they face the allergens or pollens, they start coughing vigorously. Although that cough is also dangerous because if a person coughs too much vigorously, then the alveoli can destroy, and he can cough blood. That person can cough blood. But overall, the asthma is not like that. The inhaler that they take basically contains anti-allergens or anti-allergy substances, or the inhaler contains the vasoconstrictor chemicals. You know the vasoconstrictors?
Um,
Vasodilators, I'm sorry, vasodilators.
no, sir, I've not heard of the vasodilators.
Now, write down this word VASO, dilation,
Dilation.
and VASO, constriction.
Vasoconstriction.
Vaso mean vessel, blood vessel,
Yes.
and constriction mean narrowing, dilation mean expansion.
Yes.
See, when you are not able to get enough oxygen, your body reacts to it really badly. You start coughing very much badly. So, what happens when you take the inhaler? It relaxes your lungs. It's an anti allergy substance and it dilates your vessels so you can have more blood to get more oxygen.
Yes.
So, that is the theme behind the inhalers.
Okay, sir.
It's basically relaxing the lung muscles, anti-allergens, and vasodilator substances.
Vasodilation substance. Okay, sir.
And what's the principle behind the vasodilator substances? They would expand the vessels to let more blood in so that more oxygen can be absorbed.
Can be absorbed.
Now, let me quickly explain this small topic, antagonistic muscles. Basically, there are two types of muscles in our body. One are called as synergistic. Synergistic muscles are those who work for the same aim. Like uh, two sets of muscles, one, wait, two sets of muscles. One is working for the same purpose. Okay, wait. Two sets of muscles working for same purpose, same purpose. In one set, in one, from one angle, they are working, they are supporting each other,
Supported.
supporting each other. That would be called as synergistic muscles.
So like the hamstring and
But
the
in
quadricep.
other way, mhm,
The hamstring and the quadricep, we would
yeah,
say
you can
those are synergistic
quadriceps.
muscles.
Yeah, you can say that. You can say
Okay.
that. But there are muscles that are opposing each other.
Opposing each other.
They are working for the same purpose, but they are opposing each other. Those would be called as antagonistic. Like if we are discussing a point, we are discussing a politics, and I am talking against a person, and you are talking in favor of same person, you are antagonizing me.
Yes.
You are opposing me or antagonizing me because the topic is same for both of us, but we have totally opposite thinking, so that is antagonizing.
That's antagonism. Okay.
So when the muscles work opposite to each other, that is antagonistic muscles. Let's say, you know about the biceps and triceps.
Yes, sir.
Hmm. So
One's
what
on
do the
the
biceps do?
forward and
Bicep,
one's on the back.
mhm.
Bicep, it's for
They
like
would put,
curl.
yeah, please.
Bicep is like for when we curl, but tricep is what for when we like make the arm straight, you could say.
Yeah, we would straighten our arms by the triceps,
Yes.
and we would fold it by the biceps.
Biceps.
So the purpose is moving the arm, but both are working oppositely.
Oppositely.
So that would be antagonistic muscles.
Okay.
Okay, now let's say we have uh, external intercostal muscles. They would pull the ribs outward.
Pull the
And
ribs.
then there are internal intercostal muscles. They would pull the ribs inward. So
Okay.
they are antagonizing each other. Why? Both are moving the ribs, but
In
mean
different directions.
aim is same, opposite direction, working opposite. So that
Yes.
is antagonistic.
Okay, sir.
All right, so we'll continue this. Okay, this chapter is the remaining one. You should be focusing on reading because there's cancer and emphysema,
Yes,
and
sir.
these are shaded, so only the HL students are supposed to do this.
Do
So
this.
we would
Okay.
be jumping to the next chapter in the next class. Okay, I would not be discussing this chapter again.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, sir. Have a nice day.